How were your Thanksgivings? Good. The food was good? Friends were better? Family was good? People traveled? Yeah. We're going to get talking yet, church. I don't have a black colleague anymore, so you're going to have to bear with me as I try to learn this too, but we're going to try. What time do you eat your Thanksgiving meal? It's a perennial question that seems to split the 1 or 2 o'clock people from the 6 or 7 o'clock people. And maybe it's because it's the first year in many that we've been able to entertain guests outside of our immediate family. Or maybe it's because we welcome some new friends and faces to our table that I hope will be coming year after year. But I feel like I fielded this question a lot this year. Maybe it's just Thanksgiving small talk. But what time do you eat is a question that seems to always be in the air. The early eaters proclaimed the virtues of being able to take a nap after dinner and eat leftovers later in the day before the refrigerator's chill has even made its way through the stuffing. The later eaters talk of how they like having the day to cook and prepare and not feel rushed, and how dinner looks best by candlelight rather than by daylight. What time are you eating? It's a question that so many guests ask this time of year when we open our doors and our apartments and our dining tables to friends. Now, of course, every veteran turkey cook knows that the secret to Thanksgiving success is all about timing. You make a plan by the week ahead. You set yourself small tasks and make small dishes every day the week of. You plot out your oven calendar, and if you're the cook, you try to remember to add 30 minutes somewhere in the afternoon where you can go to your own room and close the door and take a shower and put on a fresh shirt and come down ready for fun. And then it all goes out the window. But after dinner, what do you do with the rest of the day? Was there a nap? A holiday movie with the kids, sitting around talking for hours, attempting to resist the siren call of the pie that's calling for a second or third teeny sliver. This is my other favorite phrase that everybody seems to say this time of year. How do you pass the time with full stomachs and hopefully even fuller hearts, loving the time that can be spent simply giving thanks? And then how did you sleep on Thursday night? How did you wake up on Friday morning? How did you wake up this morning? This Advent morning. Thanksgiving behind us, Christmas in front of us, this Advent morning, this first day, this New Year's Day of the new church year. It's a day of new beginnings and of new preparations, of fresh attention to what is coming as we begin to imagine Emmanuel, God who is with us, coming to us again. In between the turkey and church, have you put up a tree? Have you hung a wreath? Are you making yourself and your home ready for this new season, this Advent season that leads to the Christmas one? How? Tinsel and lights? How about prayer and hope? What if, radical idea, we did as the ancients of our faith did, and we started with confession and absolution? Advent, like its sibling Lent, is one of the 2 great penitential seasons of the church year. It is deliberately meant to be bleak in order to help us see the brightness of the light that is coming even more brightly. Now, this message of Advent, this time of bleakness and of preparation, is lost on most contemporary audiences, and many years I find myself struggling that this is one of the hardest seasons to pastor through. I often feel that in this season and in most years and like every day, that the work of pastoring is about being present to the fullness of this day, to each other and with each other. This is what we all do, all of us as ministers, all of us as ministers. It's not to get ahead of ourselves or to race ahead or to get stuck in the past, but it is to stay as present as possible with the day itself. Being present on these Advent days means that it isn't Christmas Day yet. It's an Advent one. It's hard to hold that presence when jingle bells are already ringing from every store and all of our city seems to be celebrating as if it's Christmas already. I have often said that in Advent, I feel the tension of stewarding our faith tradition of presence and preparation against an entire world that is all about immediate gratification. As many of you know, this can make me grumpy. I feel alone and like I'm swimming upstream. This year, though, I'm waking up a little differently this Advent morning. I've been preparing for this. I've been telling myself you can do it. We're going to give it a try. These past pandemic years, and even this reawakening one, have just ground down my appetite for bleak, and maybe also my patience. This year, I've come to a place of wanting, of needing more joy, more of it, more joy, a whole little bit of Christmas right this very minute. Now, many years I argue with Patrick that it isn't time to get a tree yet. I never win this debate. This year, I didn't even bother. Bring on the tree, I said. Most years, I like to let Thanksgiving dinner truly settle and to get the leftovers out of the refrigerator and the smell out of the curtains before Christmas carols come on the radio or we start singing to the dogs in Christmas modes. Not this year. Most years, I think to myself, wait, it's not Christmas yet, and it won't be for several more weeks. And decide, Christmas Day is the beginning of the Christmas season, not the end. Again, not a battle I'm fighting this year. The dogs' holiday sweaters have all been washed and are on at least one of them. There are strands of garland and lights on pretty much anything that doesn't move. We were chatting with our mothers last night. They're both on Zoom, hello. And we were telling them what we had done, and they were surprised too. They were surprised at this sudden softening of the stuffy Protestant tyrant's heart that has let Christmas come early to my house. And I said to them, well, there simply isn't time for any less joy. So bring it on. Bring it on now. The Apostle Paul, in that passage that Michael read for us just a few minutes ago, writes about time and timeliness as well. He writes about it more than a few times in his letters. And in this one, in his magnus opus, in his letters to the Roman Church, which is always fun to imagine this time of year because we think of the Roman Church and we think of St. Paul's, we think of big, grand architecture and beautiful art. It wasn't the Roman Church that he was writing to. This is the Roman Church pre-Rome, pre-Roman Church, pre-Catholic and Protestant, pre-everything except for Christ's self. And to this little struggling Roman church, Paul writes that it is time to wake up from their sleep and to see for themselves the glory of their salvation, which is right at hand. Wake up, Paul says. The night of preparation and of your past is done. The new day is here. The new day is here. He tells them this as an invitation to join in the joy of what a new day has in store, the promises and hopes of a 6 a.m. to-do list that hasn't yet been neglected by the hourly distractions that lead to the 8 p.m. ice cream. It's a new day, says Paul. It's a new day for you. What? Oh, what are you going to do with it? Will you live in the fullness of this day? Will you stop the quarreling and the jealousy that ruined your sleep last night? Will you wake from whatever intoxicates you and whatever addictions hold you back and keep your attention drawn from what really matter? A season of Christmas parties inevitably lead to some occasional debauchery or too merry reveling. Paul would not agree, but this happens. And maybe this is why our church fathers made Advent a season of confession. But what is the brightness of this day, even gloomy as it is, with just one candle burning, a day on which we will baptize children of God? What is the promise of this day that is the promise to each of you that was made in your own baptisms? What do your dreams admit that your lips have never dared to say? What torments you at 2 a.m. that could be put to rest with some honesty and capital T truth-telling? What of your unconscious, fearfully and wonderfully made as it is? What of that unconscious might you be brave enough to start making conscious as we open our hearts and prepare our homes and wake up to salvation, which is nearer than we even know? Imagine a day, Paul says, when you can be fully awake to the fullness of you, the fullness of your salvation, and the fullness of God's love for you. Do you know what time it is? He asks the ancient Romans. It is time to wake up. It is the moment, the very moment, to wake from sleep. Many of you may know the poet William Stafford, and if you do, you probably know his poem, A Ritual to Read to Each Other. In graduate school, I had to memorize it. Imagine that, memorizing things, even in the 21st century. And I commend the entirety of this poem for your Advent meditations, maybe even your memorizations. And it's the last stanza that speaks most clearly to me with Paul this morning. The poem opens with a plea for truly and deeply getting to know one another, to find out who each other are, so that we can know who we are and how to live. And it goes on to outline the snares that may keep us from all getting to our salvation. And following these observations and an appeal to a shadowy voice, as Stafford calls it, Stafford begins his final stanza with this couplet. For it is important that awake people be awake, or a breaking line may discourage them back to sleep. For it is important that awake people be awake, or a breaking line may discourage them back to sleep. Not to make Paul second fiddle, but Stafford's lines here will be my Advent prayer. Do you know what time it is? That's Paul's question. The answer is beside the point to Stafford. In Stafford's language, only awake people can answer a question like this. A sleeping person who insists on still sleeping is going to grumble only at best. But an awake person, a person like you, or me, or that we want to be, awake people have a task this Advent morning. We have a task set for us. It is the moment we wake from sleep. It is the moment that we become awake people ourselves. Awake to the joy and the fullness and the contradiction and the pain of who we are, without shying away from any of it. Maybe all of it's okay. Awake to the hope of what we might be and the loss of what we will never again, or maybe never were, be. Awake to Emmanuel within us, God all around us, peace, hope, joy, and love for us. For it is important that awake people be awake is a tidy summation of Advent's preparations. It's a fine excuse for turning up the Christmas music and making the lights even a little bit brighter than you might otherwise think. Whatever it takes, wake up and stay awake. Be awake. Awake to God and awake to yourself and awake to God's world all around you. Friends, it is longing for you. Emmanuel is coming to the world. This is true and known. We know this every Advent. We proclaim its truth every Christmas. The world is also waiting for you. For you were created for this moment. Your salvation is near. It may even be here. For it is important that awake people be awake. Otherwise, Stafford warns, a breaking line may discourage you back to sleep, back to ignorance, back to putting your head in the sand, back to nothingness. Paraphrasing Paul and echoing Stafford in still yet another way, be awake, because the devil may drag you under by the sharp lapel of your checkered coat. So sit down, sit down, sit down, sit down. Sit down, you're rocking the boat. Don't go back to sleep. One candle burns on our Advent wreath today. It is the candle for hope. And in just a few moments, we will celebrate the sacrament of baptism, which is a sacrament all about hope. And as the lights continue to grow, and as Willis and Nellie continue to grow, and as each of us continue to grow, as days continue to be filled with both darkness and light, my hope is that we all may come to be continually and perpetually more awake, whatever it takes. Friends, it is the moment to wake from sleep. Your salvation is now arriving, so whatever is past is past, and what will be is not yet known. But the joy of salvation, of your salvation, is yours now for the having whenever it is that you are ready to wake yourself from whatever sleep you have been in for far too long, from whatever has kept you back, from whatever dreams may be that haven't yet come to be. Do you know what time it is? It is the moment, this very moment, that it is time for you and for all of us to wake up. It will be joyous when we do. This I can promise you. It will also be hard, for there are any number of breaking lines that may try to lull us back to sleep. But stay awake. Stay awake this Advent season. Stay fully awake. And see for yourself that salvation is here.